past, the UN has called America out on police brutality towards the Black citizens, and also probably over a year ago, they made a recommendation that Black people in America should receive reparations. But of course, we know America ain't about to get off their ass and do nothing. So here's another report that came out from the UN. After a UN warning over racism, America's self-image begins to crack. And this is after the Charlottesville incident. There is a certain expectation, a certain image that comes to mind of the country that receives a rebuke from the United Nations on human rights. One in the South or the East, with a military dictatorship, perhaps a country that has a large oppressed religious or ethnic minority, or has a poor record of treatment of treating women as second-class citizens. Earlier this week, the United States joined those countries. The publicly shamed staple of those that have incurred the wrath of the global human rights ombudsman. Inevitably, it was due to race. The UN committee charged with tackling racism has issued an early warning over conditions in the US and urged the Trump administration to take unequivocally and unconditionally reject discrimination. The warning specifically refers to events in Charlottesville, Virginia, where the civil rights activist Heather Heyer was killed when a car crashed into a group of people protesting against white nationalists rally. Such statements are usually issued by the UN on the elimination of racial discrimination, CERD, over fears of ethnic or religious conflict. In the past decade, the committee has only issued 6 warnings. Those admonishments went to Burundi, Iraq, Ivory Coast, Kyrgyzstan, and Nigeria. Civilizations are undone in many ways, not all of them obvious. We tend to think of decline along military or economic lines, but it is actually a nation's culture, particularly in terms of equality, that determines its civilization credentials. America's descent into what looks like a full-on race crisis is graphically dragging it down the development scale. Reality is closing in on the country's exceptionalist self-perception. But to be shocked by this is to thought of the U.S. as a superior civilization in the first place. America has never been superior. That is just a bunch of fluff they put out there in front of the world. But like I said before, America has always been weak from within, done a poor job socially. Having picked the brief window in between Trump's travel ban appeals, while the ban itself was still suspended pending a court decision, I managed to secure a visa to the U.S. and traveled to the East and West Coast. Even among some Trump supporters, it was clear to me that there is a sense that America has been outed. There is a burgeoning self-awareness that the country is now tarred with the brush of intolerance and indelibly as Africa is with the ethnic warfare. Those countries that receive rebukes from the UN over human rights, as you can see from the list of those warned before the US, don't tend to be the ones that developed problems overnight. What the Trump era is graphically exposing is that America's very public meltdown is an unraveling of issues that were suppressed, deflect, or denied for many years. This didn't all happen in 8 months since Trump became president. The pertinent fact here is that it took only 8 months. It took only 8 months to go from a nation that voted for a black president 2 terms in a row to one that is suffering from race riots and killings, with officials having to send troops out on the streets and declare a state of emergency. The speed with which it happened is a clue that it was in fact happening all along, unseen. No, America's racism has never been unseen. It's always been seen and always been on display. And the fact that it was lying in waiting is an indicator that how little racial equality is prized in America's DNA. There is a reason why extensively developed countries, once faced with adversity, a vacuum of authority, or questionable leadership, tend to fall apart along the lines of race, LGBTQ, and women's rights. It is because in times of stability, when there is prosperity and rational leadership, the promotion and enshrining of the rights of the more vulnerable is cosmetic at best, undermined and papered over at worst. The foundations were there and continue to be laid even during Obama's leadership. It is no coincidence that the rights most easily dislodged and taken back, whether it is those of transgender members of the military or Muslim U.S. citizens of certain origins, or those of minorities. Even in the UK, it is no coincidence that the first jubilant spasm after the Brexit vote was manifested in a rise in hate crime. It is no coincidence that making America great again, or taking back control, inevitably includes wanting to claw back whatever a little space was ceded to diversity and equality. The reclamation lies at the very heart of the US and UK's modern nation building. The UN cautioned the Trump administration should take the CERT's early warning very seriously and rescind its decision to exacerbate the mandates and budgets of civil rights institutes, and its attempt to exclude white nationalism from the federal government's counting violence and extreme programs. See, that was Trump that removed them from that list. He took the white supremacists off. So that's what they're talking about. And in immigration and refugee policies based on anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant sentiments. But even that will not be enough. The UN's message is a good start in formulating the language and paradigm that sees discrimination as an isolated phenomena, but fundamental to the infrastructure of the country, in the same way the nation's other inequalities. Race hate is not a temporary blip or hysteria that has come to pass because of a freak election or referendum. The only way forward is to remember that when the good are in power. So this just came out on today, the 25th. All right, now we'll leave the link to this Guardian article in the description box. The U.S. faced a rebuke also in the UN over police brutality, the police shootings of Black men. And the U.S. actually walked out when they were being rebuked. So they don't really care what the UN say, but it's kind of nice that they put this out for the world to see because America has not progressed at all as far as race is concerned, and it's not going to. You have people in charge that have a serious inability to change. They can't change. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family.